growing, and more precisely, we start receiving updates, or we stopped receiving updates about changes on the ground somewhere around two important events. The first one, of course, is the conversation between the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, and president of the United States of America, Donald Trump, which and this conversation, according to Trump, was very bad. He was dissatisfied with this call and unhappy with Putin. Later, by the way, we got another report about call between Ukraine and Trump, and this time Zelensky stated that the conversation with Trump was probably the best of all time. Obviously, this is something like a media attack, but at the same time, I believe that he is saying the truth, at least partially. And this is not the only reason, most likely, why the Russians were forced to slow down their offensive. Currently, we have a very huge problems between Russian and the state of Azerbaijan, former Soviet state, and currently we see that the situation between these countries remains tense. For example, we have several articles that Vladimir Zelensky and Aliyev had calls, conversations. We see that Azerbaijan support Ukraine. We see that Ukraine supports Azerbaijan. We can see that Azerbaijanians captured and lots of Russian civilians in the city of Baku. Some developers, some journalists were captured. The Russians, from their side, according to pro-Russian resources, captured lots of criminals on the territory of the Russian Federation. So we see that the situation is very difficult, and we see that it seems that somebody is trying to create a situation when the Russians and the Azerbaijanians are the enemies. So somebody wants everybody to see this situation exactly like this. That's because Azerbaijan is an ally of, or at least former ally of, the Russian Federation, and now it seems that they're the worst enemies in the world. Furthermore, yesterday was a very interesting summit on the territory of Azerbaijan, and the most important thing is that the president of Iran, Pezeshkian, arrived to the Baku, where he had meeting with the president of Azerbaijan, Aliyev, and the most important that they also had a meeting on the territory of the city by the name of Susha. This is a special meeting, obviously. Here we can see the city of Susha. Here we can see the president of Iran and Azerbaijan. The city of Susha is the city of a former Karabakh Republic, unrecognized Republic of Nagorno-Karabakh, that was recaptured by the Azerbaijanians during the previous few years. And what is the most important thing, and what were they talking about, the president of Iran and Azerbaijan? Obviously, the president of Iran is very weak after the war with Israel, and the focal point for the Azerbaijan is this small part. So Azerbaijanians, probably since 1991, were wanted and were planning to do everything they can with the purpose to seek an opportunity to seek a chance to establish complete control over these small currently big parts of Azerbaijan, the eastern part and the western part. The eastern Azerbaijan state, very small state, not big one, and this small island between Armenia, Iran, and Turkey is the second part of Azerbaijan, something like an island of resistance there. And this part doesn't have any connections on the ground with the eastern Azerbaijan. So there is no way to understand. And this is the main reason why the Azerbaijanians don't have possibilities to get oil and gas, to sell gas and oil without any problems to the territory of Turkey. Because if, for example, Azerbaijanians were controlling this small area, they could have possibilities to build a pipeline.
These knives sell out faster than tickets to
to sell gas and oil to Turkey using this road, using this possible road. But to do this, first of all, they need to control this territory. And now we see the escalation, and the Russians is not the only side who is interested in this area as a part of Armenia. Iran is also interested in this small pocket as a part of Armenia because this allows to control Azerbaijan both for the Russians and for the Iranians. But now Iran is weak as never. And now we see that the Russians are deep in the conflict in Ukraine. And now we see that the Western countries most likely will try to escalate the situation in this region. Furthermore, and now this most important part, the main intelligence directorate, the Ukrainian intelligence service, reported that the Russian armed forces are reinforcing their contingent in Armenia to pressure the countries on the South Caucasus, specifically they mentioned a base in Gyumri. So the Russians currently are trying to reinforce their presence in the northwestern part of Armenia. And obviously, the main reason of this reinforcement is to stop any escalation, stop anything that can lead to direct war between Azerbaijan and Armenia. And for this, of course, corridor. So maybe this is the reason of all escalation between Russia and Azerbaijan. Maybe Azerbaijan and Turkey understand that now or never, that Iran is weak as never, that Russia is deeply inside of Ukraine, and we see no peace ceasefire, we see no agreements between Russia and Ukraine. So they believe maybe that this it's time to begin something. But the most biggest problem for Turkey, Azerbaijan is that Armenia is an ally of Russia. I'm talking about military alliance. And if Azerbaijan begins something, then the Russians will be forced to react. They will be forced to begin a direct war with Azerbaijan. And this is the main reason of all escalation between Russia and Azerbaijan.
Okay, hello everyone. How's it going? Sorry that video was playing for quite some time, but I thought that it is bringing quite a lot of very important context for what I'm hoping to talk about tonight. And this is just sort of thing I think I see it being talked a little bit, a lot about in the Eastern, like the podcasts more based in the East, like Syriana Analysis. The Duran did an episode on it. They're, one of them's a Greek and the other is an Englishman. So people with more of a stake in this part in the Caucasus, uh, they're really paying attention to what's happening there. And I don't really see maybe Western commentators catching up on this story. Probably like Fiorella Isabel or somebody's most likely to be the first on it kind of thing. But I digress. How are you guys doing? Hope you had a good week without us there. Hope you didn't miss us too much. Sorry we couldn't be here for you guys last Thursday, but I managed to get a new job. I'm sure some of you guys have heard me talking about it already. I'm entering the little pizza wars here. I started working at a place called Franco's Pizza. So I'm not making the pizzas yet, but everyone seems to be appreciating me there. So if I keep up my good work and maintain my reputation, I'll be making the pizzas in no time. So hopefully, let's not get arrogant. But so Abby's not going to be with us here tonight. She's having a big migraine headache problem, so I empathize with that. Not the kind of thing it's easy to do, like with a big headache. So feel free to rest up, Abby, and we'll catch you up next time. So she's also been having a lot of. It's one of those things have been looking up for me. I'm feeling a little bit better, but then Abby's having some misfortune lately. She's having some car problems. So all of a sudden, she's got a huge bill to deal with to get these cars fixed up. And fortunately, I think one of them is serviceable enough for Tosh to get to work. But I think I'm going to be encouraging her. I think she'd be probably needing or wanting to be promoting a GoFundMe to maybe help her pay for this unexpected, untimely expense when she's still looking for work. So let's support Abby if we can, please. In other news, before I move on to the show, I just wanted to do a little bit of a little bit of a celebration for I was not able to prepare as much for the show as I usually like to today, because earlier I was, for the 3 hours today, I was in landlord tenant board court, virtual courtroom, going through the whole explanation of why we deserve compensation, blah blah blah. And after all of it, it sounds like she's granting my application. I'm not sure if that means I'm going to be getting some of the money that I was claiming, but at least I will be getting some of the repairs that I was demanding will be mandated for them to act on. So a little bit of a Pyrrhic victory, as always, dealing with the tenant boards, but I'll take it over nothing. So, and with that, just give me a moment, and I will move to my first segment here. So that video was by the Military Summary channel, the opener. I watch him for my daily coverage about the Ukraine-Russia war, and I encourage you to do so too. And feel free to look for other sources for comparison, all that jazz. So, but I find him to be a diligent and informative resource that does not appear to be trying to get away with lying to me. So take that for what you will. So, so I meant to have that up during the video, but then I realized that I need the disclaimer thing too. So let's go with the Zangezur corridor for the first segment here, because he talked about it quite a bit in the video there, and I'd like to elaborate on that. So just bear with me. So hello, Jacqueline, John Kemper, Driving Me Macy, Extra Bulla, Old Man Barker. Good to see all of you. Cool. So this article is from WION, which is an Indian news outlet. I think maybe a liberal, don't quote me on it, a more progressive kind of Indian news outlet, but do your own research. This is just the article that comes up in relation to this kind of topic. So this is called Iran-Russia tensions. Tehran rebukes Kremlin for supporting Azerbaijan's Zangezur corridor. This is from September 6, 2024, which is quite dated already, kind of a while ago, but I find it quite relevant for historical materialist context. With the grain of salt being that WION, the Indian outlet, India is not exactly Iran's friend, but they do have that working relationship with Russia. So let's keep in mind who the story comes from. So in a rare warning to its key ally, Iran has advised Russia against siding with Azerbaijan over a border dispute between the two countries. Iranian Foreign Minister Saeed Abbas Araghchi took to X to rebuke Russia after it backed Azerbaijan's campaign for drawing a land corridor along the Armenia-Iran border. So this is one of those disputes that happened last year that most of us probably completely missed. Let me know if you've heard about this or not, but I hope that I'm sharing with you something that you didn't know, that it's good that you do know now. So regional peace, security, and stability is not merely a preference, but a pillar of our national security. Any threat from north, south, east, or west to territorial integrity of our neighbors or redrawing of boundaries is totally unacceptable and a red line for Iran. Aragchi wrote on the social media platform. The statement shows that Iran's new reformist government is willing to go down the untrodden path of standing up to Russia, a key economic and strategic ally. I'm not sure if that's what it, draw your own conclusions. It certainly shows that there is some tension over this corridor. So everyone has a lot to lose, and there's no win-win situation that will be able to resolve this. That's why I feel this is an important thing to understand as a driver of conflict. Russia-Iran tensions. Concerns have long been raised in Tehran over deepening security ties with Moscow. Critics often highlight the diplomatic price that Iran has to pay for backing Russia militarily and reportedly providing it with drones that have been used on the battlefield against Ukraine. Iran earlier this week has summoned a Russian envoy and expressed its displeasure, saying it was not impressed with Moscow encouraging a dispute on its borders. Mohsen Rezai, the former overall commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps and the Secretary of the Expediency Council, also condemned Russia's unacceptable stance. The behavior of Russian statesmen was not acceptable and in clear contradiction with their declaration of friendship with Iran. These ambiguities should be resolved, he was quoted as saying by The Guardian. What is the Azerbaijani plan? Iran is sensitive to Azerbaijani and Turkish plans to establish the Zangezur corridor, a transportation concept that is being gradually implemented to secure Azerbaijan's access to the Nakhchivan exclave by skipping Armenia. I guess that's another word for Western Azerbaijan. Once materialized, the Zangezur corridor will cut off Iran's direct land access to Armenia. Meanwhile, Ankara is also supporting it, as it would act as a geopolitical link between Turkey and Azerbaijan, as well as Central Asia. So that's all that there is for that article. Hopefully that establishes some useful context. So as far as the title that I have for this video is Neo-Ottomanism, pardon me for tripping over my tongue, Multipolar Imperialism or Paper Tiger. Now that might be a little bit of a provocative, might be a little bit of a stretch to go so far as to question Neo-Ottomanism as nothing more than a paper tiger, because it does seem to have some teeth to it. However, whether it's kind of Turkish imperialism is a little bit more of a nuanced question to ask because of Turkey's relationship with NATO. So my opinion that I'm tentatively formulating on this question of Neo-Ottomanism is that it's not really politically viable, or like the expansionism is not really advanceable as long as Turkey remains cucked by NATO, right? As long as it continues to remain within the alliance and its foreign policy diverted, subverted, dictated by the United States and the rest of NATO, I don't really think that we can make any serious concerns about Neo-Ottomanism being a viable new boogeyman for us to be a little bit concerned about. Of course, I'm a Canadian, way the fuck out in Canada, nowhere near this part of the world, never been there, don't really know anybody from there. So please keep that in mind. And I apologize to anyone of those ethnicities who may be offended by some of my miseducated or educated guesses, whatever it's up to you to decide. So let's see what else for a little bit more context, let's move to my next segment here. Not really looking to have a super long show, but as usual, I want to do my best not to leave anything out. So we'll see how long we go. But when I'm by myself, I do a lot of talking. My voice gets tired. So, how's it going, Lance? Good to see you. Hope everyone's having a good time today. Okay, here we go. Presenting my screen. Okay, so this article, because like I was saying, I was a bit busy earlier today. I didn't have as much time to do as much research as I'd like, so I only skimmed a little bit of the beginning of this article, so we can kind of read it together and we'll have a bit of a blind reaction, I guess. Not something I want to do every time, but it's not the end of the world. A Sultan's Shadow. This is from fairobserver.com, so random website. Independence, diversity, debate. Sounds good. A Sultan's Shadow, the truth about Neo-Ottomanism. Neo-Ottomanism was initially born out of a desire to elevate Turkey's international standing and transform the nation from a medium-scale state into a regional and even global power. The policy has yielded mixed results at best. Turkey has experienced an economic, cultural, and demographic decline despite limited military and diplomatic benefits. I apologize about this "we need your consent," but it's trying to force me to say I accept, because I try and go and see what my options are, and apparently I don't have any options. So not very cool, Fair Observer, but maybe you're just having a glitch. This is articles from March 24, 2024. But it's not really like about like breaking news. Right? This is like a historical materialist article. So the fact that it's an old article, it's written in 2024 makes it actually very recent and relevant. So the latter half of the 19th century witnessed the birth of a concept, Ottomanism. At the time, the Ottoman Empire, with its base of power in Turkey, ruled a vast domain stretching from southeast Europe to North Africa, Arabia, and the Caucasus. Ottomanist intellectuals envisioned a unified Ottoman nation, transcending the diverse ethnicities, religions, and languages within the empire's vast borders. The ideology of Ottomanism aimed to foster a sense of shared identity and belonging that superseded these traditional divisions. However, Ottomanism's journey has gone through detours and complexities. Under Sultan Abdulhamid II, the ideology took on a more pronounced Islamic character. The main point was the Sultan's role as Caliph of the Islamic world. This new approach aimed to unite the empire's Muslim population under a shared faith. Ottomanism could not save the empire, which succumbed to internal dissent and external pressures. With the abolition of the Sultanate on November 1st, 1922, and the establishment of the Republic of Turkey in 1923, the Ottoman state became a historical relic. The once hopeful vision of unity faded alongside the civilization it sought to preserve. Emerging in the late 20th and early 21st centuries, Neo-Ottomanism revived ideas from the original empire within the context of the Republic of Turkey. Current proponents of Neo-Ottomanism advocate for a more active Turkish foreign policy in regions that once belonged to the Ottoman Empire. They emphasize Turkey's potential role as a leader and mediator in the Middle East and surrounding regions. However, Neo-Ottomanism has resulted in a downgrade of Turkey's position, both politically and economically. Its emphasis on past glories and a more interventionist foreign policy has strained relations with key countries and diverted resources from addressing crucial internal challenges. Almost like any kind of imperialism, always is designed to, in narrative form, be about protecting and improving the lives of the domestic citizens, but in reality, it actually just exacerbates those crucial internal challenges that never seem to be addressed, because the more important thing is adventurism abroad. Okay, Bella, go on. Just somebody coming home or going somewhere. Hey, go on. Bad girl. I apologize, everyone, but maybe it's a good time to take a pause here and check in. So, sounds good. Looks like tonight's not a big chat night, which is I'm totally okay with, because I'm kind of always have a hard time doing article reading and watching what you guys are up to. So feel free to make any comments. Let me know if you're bored or if you appreciate whatever. Like, share, and subscribe or whatever. Sure. So here we are. The rise of Neo-Ottomanism. The term Neo-Ottomanism first emerged in the 1970s in Greece as a response to concerns about Turkey's interventions in Cyprus. However, until the late 1980s, Turkey's foreign policy remained largely focused on the West. This was evident in its close relationship with the United States and its pursuit of membership in the European Economic Community, precursor of the European Union. The military coup of 1980 marked a turning point that led to significant changes in Turkey's political landscape. Turgut Özal, who became prime minister in 1983, played a pivotal role in this transformation. He implemented a neoliberal economic model that aimed to integrate Turkey more deeply with the global market. Almost like these coups happened all over the world, all around the same time, and brought us the disaster that we all know and love today called neoliberal economic model. He also recognized the growing economic importance of regions beyond Europe and the US. Özal shifted the focus towards fostering good relations and economic ties with countries like Iraq, Iran, and Libya. While maintaining connections with Europe and the US remained an important aspect of his foreign policy, Özal emphasized Turkey's historical and cultural connections with the Turkic world and the broader Islamic world. This newfound emphasis on these historical ties marked the incorporation of elements of Neo-Ottomanism into Turkish foreign policy. Özal strategically used concepts like Islam, Turkism, and Ottoman history to build bridges with countries in the Middle East, Balkans, and Central Asia. But if you are trying to maintain ties and build ties with European Union, NATO, and the US, and try and act like you're building honest bridges with countries in the Middle East, Balkans, and Central Asia, you might be playing some kind of balancing act that's all full of shit, and it's all altruistic gaslighting or just straight up gaslighting and coercion. So anyway, Özal's death in 1993 marked the end of the first era of Neo-Ottomanism. The following years were characterized by internal political instability and economic problems, leading to a temporary halt in the development of this foreign policy doctrine. Shift towards assertive regionalism. The 2002 elections marked a turning point in Turkish foreign policy with the rise of the Justice and Development Party led by Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The AKP, rooted in a center-right Islamist ideology, promised a fresh approach to foreign policy that would depart from the previous era of coalition government's focus on Western alignment. This new vision drew heavily from the doctrine of strategic depth, developed by political scientist Ahmet Davutoglu. I hope I'm getting these Turkish names at least sort of okay. But anyway, strategic depth emphasized Turkey's unique geopolitical position at the crossroads of Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. It argued that Turkey could leverage its historical and cultural legacy, particularly its Ottoman past, to become a pivotal player in a multipolar world order. Initially, the AKP adopted a zero problems with neighbors policy, prioritizing soft power tools. Turkey significantly increased its foreign aid contributions and became a major donor in the region. Zero problems with neighbors in 2025, when Turkey is now occupying a good chunk of northern Syria, is definitely, coming across as just deceptive, manipulative diplomacy designed to destroy. So I don't, but anyway, back to the reading. Cultural programs attempted to foster closer ties with neighboring countries by promoting Turkish language, music, and cuisine. This approach resonated with many regional actors, particularly those wary of Western dominance. Simultaneously, the AKP pursued EU membership with renewed vigor. They introduced domestic reforms to align with European standards, and Turkey actively participated in regional initiatives to showcase its commitment to stability and cooperation. A key example was the significant improvement in relations with Syria, a former adversary. Right. Time tells quite a story when it doesn't heal all wounds, right? So diplomatic ties increased, economic cooperation and energy partnerships between the two countries flourished. However, the EU accession process proved to be a slow and frustrating experience. The EU's internal resistance to Turkish membership fueled a growing sense of disillusionment in Ankara. Turks perceive the whole process as foot dragging. I'm a little bit wondering what this author knew and when he knew it. March 24, 2024. I forget when exactly the collapse of Syria happened. Everything's been happening so fast lately. I guess I'm just going to briefly look that up here just because I think it's kind of important to keep in mind. December 8th, 2024. So this is one of those things that was written earlier in the year, and by the end of the year, the Assad regime falls, and so there's some interesting irony maybe to glean from reading what people thought about how things were going versus how they have happened. So pardon me for that brief interruption. Let's find where we were. Okay, I think it was right there. Let me just check in on you guys. Hello, Antediluvian Atheist and Jimmy Tessiol. Thanks for hopping in. And Sean, what's up? Hope you guys enjoy some reading, story time tonight. So, Ahmet Davutoglu amplified his sentiment when he became foreign minister in 2009. A strong proponent of Neo-Ottomanism, Davutoglu envisioned a more assertive role for Turkey on the world stage. He argued that his country's future lay not solely in aligning with the West, but in reestablishing its influence as a regional leader. Several events served as catalysts for this shift. In 2009, Erdogan delivered a scathing critique of Israel's actions in Gaza in his one-minute speech at the World Economic Forum. Whoa, big victory, whatever. So impressed by your whole big, whatever, cheap talk of a big speech, right? So that really didn't mean anything. Erdogan highlighted his growing sense of divergence from traditional Western foreign policy positions. The following year, the deadly Mavi Marmara flotilla attack, where Israeli forces raided a Turkish humanitarian aid convoy headed for Gaza, which was kind of that missing piece of historical context if you were watching the Freedom Flotilla without understanding that a couple years earlier, this Turkish humanitarian aid convoy was attacked, like they were expecting Greta to, but whatever. I think there's a nice Marx quote for that. First is first is tragedy, second is farce. You know, that kind of, you know what I'm, hopefully, you know the thing, right? These incidents resonated deeply with Turkish public opinion, strengthening the appeal of Neo-Ottoman ideals that emphasized a more independent and assertive foreign policy. The Arab Spring uprisings of 2010 presented a golden opportunity for Turkey to advance its Neo-Ottoman ambitions. I want to read that one. The Arab Spring uprisings of 2010 presented a golden opportunity for Turkey to advance its Neo-Ottoman ambitions. Embracing a pro-Arab stance, Turkey actively supported rebellions against established governments in Egypt and Libya. And Turkey is also, I missed it in my presentation about Qatar. I meant to mention that the other main core presence for where the Muslim Brotherhood was established and their activities were kind of radiating out from was Turkey. And a lot of the decline, I would say, that's happened to the Muslim Brotherhood has everything to do with, Turkey hosting its ambitions because it doesn't really agree with them. Embracing a pro-Arab stance, Turkey actively supported rebellions against established governments in Egypt and Libya. Ankara hoped to cultivate close ties with these new governments, fostering economic partnerships and establishing itself as a champion of democratic reform in the region. Yeah, right. This approach aligned with Neo-Ottomanism emphasis on fostering regional leadership and projecting Turkish influence beyond its borders. However, the Arab Spring's aftermath proved to be far more complex than anticipated. The rise of Islamist movements to power in Egypt and Libya initially bolstered Turkey's foreign policy ambitions. However, the subsequent descent into instability and violence in these countries exposed the limitations of the Neo-Ottoman approach, or the imperialist approach in general, because that's mostly what it produces, is instability and violence, and only profit for very few people who deserve to be locked up, if not hung. Turkey's ability to influence events on the ground proved to be limited, and its regional standing became entangled with the ideological struggles within Arab societies. 21st century descent into instability. Turkey openly supported the Muslim Brotherhood government in Egypt. When a military coup overthrew it in 2013, Turkey's regional ties with Egypt became strained. Turkey's condemnation of the coup and its staunch backing of the Brotherhood led to a diplomatic rift with Egypt and its allies in the Gulf, leaving Turkey increasingly isolated in the Middle East. Except now we see, I'm not sure if we reported on it or not, but if you haven't heard, Turkey's been trying to establish a strong presence in Somalia. I think they have made a deal that they get all the profits, or they get to like own one of Somalia's major ports, and they're providing them like military training and everything, and weapons deals. And Turkey's actually trying to become like a weapons contractor, competing with American and European and Israeli weapon and Russian weapon sales to Africans in northwestern Africa, right? But as much of Africa as they could probably get their hands on, like any, typical capitalist. So I digress. Let's get back to the article. This isolation had significant economic consequences. Trade and investment between Turkey and the Arab states declined sharply. Internally, Neo-Ottomanism's emphasis on the Ummah, Muslim community, fostered a sense of pan-Islamism that challenged the core tenets of the Turkish Republic's secular identity. The concept of Ummah fueled the rise of Islamist tendencies within Turkish society, particularly among conservative segments of the population. Except that this Turkish pan-Islamism directly competes with Iranian pan-Islamism and other kinds of forms, I would imagine. I don't really know enough about this stuff to be really commenting on it too much. So, educational reforms introduced under the AKP placed a greater emphasis on Islamic history and culture, eroding secular values in the public sphere. These social tensions manifested in increased polarization and a decline in religious tolerance towards minority groups. The year 2013 marked a turning point for Turkey on multiple fronts. The Gezi Park protests erupted in response to a government development project that threatened a beloved public space in Istanbul. The protests morphed into a broader movement against the AKP government's perceived authoritarian tendencies. The government propagated further emphasis on Ottoman history and identity. Grandiose infrastructure projects like the replica Ottoman barracks on the banks of the Bosporus deliberately attempted to romanticize the Ottoman past and distract from present-day challenges. The Syrian civil war, which began in the same year, added another layer of complexity to Turkey's foreign policy. While Turkey initially supported the rebels fighting against Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's regime, the emergence of extremist groups like ISIS and the Kurdish YPG, People's Protection Units, backed by the US, posed a significant security threat on its borders, and we've all kind of seen the outcome of that. Not sure how much this article is pretty long, so I think we should probably move on, unless maybe I'll put the vote to you guys. Do you want to keep reading this article, or do you want to move on? What's up, Sulamoon and KYE, Kill Your Egregores? Good to see you. And Cobra Commander said the YPG and the YPJ were pure CIA ops. Yeah, that's the part that I'm not even getting into, because I'm just kind of reading the article and giving a little bit of commentary, but mostly just kind of leaving it up for everyone to make up their own opinions, hopefully. So, all right, cool. Cobra Commander says keep reading. Sean says keep going. So if anyone says we should move on, say your piece now, or forever hold your peace. Cobra says, Russia selling weapons to terrorists in Africa? Nah, let's just skip that part. Russia, see, good guys. I never said terrorists. I'm just saying selling weapons to Africans. Like there's a huge market there, and they're geopolitically motivated to, like, seems like everyone except for Africans are motivated to keep Africa down to some degree, except maybe the Chinese. But even them, you could argue, have an economic interest in maintaining cheap prices for resources, right? So we'll cover that another day. So okay, cool. I'm going to be moving on. So back to the article. I think we read that part. ISIS carried out a series of deadly terrorist attacks within Turkey, targeting tourist destinations and civilian populations. The YPG, affiliated with the Kurdistan Workers' Party, a Kurdish separatist group designated internationally as a terrorist group, clashed with Turkish security forces along the border and further destabilized the region. Additionally, Russian and Iranian support for the Syrian government forced Turkey into a precarious geopolitical balancing act. Turkey's attempts to contain the Syrian conflict within its borders and prevent a mass refugee influx strained its economic resources and humanitarian capacity. Umma-oriented propaganda aimed at Muslim countries encouraged uncontrolled migration towards Turkey. Millions of refugees fleeing the Syrian civil war poured into Turkey, straining its social services, economy, and infrastructure. The influx of refugees also contributed to rising social tensions and xenophobia within Turkish society. And I would just briefly mention that I feel like the people who do that whole 4D imperialist chess would be entirely willing and motivated to intentionally drive those migrants into Turkey. I would imagine even like I would speculate that even Erdogan and the people around him himself knew full well that this would be an excuse that they could use to practice revanchism, I believe would be the right word, where they could go reclaim lost territories in the name of whatever glory and whatever excuse or whatever. If they have a grievance that they feel is useful as a casus belli, then, you know, millions of refugees straining your resources and your infrastructure is one of those things that is a serious enough problem that gives a country an excuse to have much more extreme responses, right? So, but I'm getting a little bit carried away. I meant to be brief about that. Turkey's political landscape was particularly tumultuous between 2015 and 2016. Internal power struggles within the AKP and a surge in terrorist attacks by ISIS and Kurdish separatists exposed the potential dangers of an expansive foreign policy, especially considering what I just said, whatever, about how we recognize how ISIS is run by CIA and Israeli intelligence. Then they do terrorist strikes in Turkey. Turkey now has a reason to cry foul. The controversial downing of a Russian jet by the Turkish military, which resulted in the crew's deaths, strained Russia-Turkish relations further. This put heavy pressure on bilateral trade and tourism. Turkey critically needed to evaluate Neo-Ottomanism costs and benefits. Wonder if they actually did that. The pursuit of an ambitious foreign policy had diverted resources away from addressing pressing domestic issues like poverty, unemployment, and social inequality. In 2016, after a failed military coup attempt against Erdogan, Turkey declared a state of emergency and subsequent purge against the alleged plotters. Erdogan began the transition to a presidential system which allotted him significant power. Interestingly, Neo-Ottomanism played a role in legitimizing his new system. Supporters of the president appealed to Islamic pride sentiments within a segment of the population by portraying him as a strong leader akin to an Ottoman sultan. Concerns have arisen among citizens regarding the Turkish government's commitment to democratic principles. In response, the government cracked down on popular dissent. It arrested thousands of protesters, purged its civil service and military, and tightened its control on the media and the courts. And this is where me saying something like Neo-Ottomanism is a paper tiger is pretty disingenuous and disrespectful to those thousands of protesters arrested, purged, worse. So, but anyway, these actions attracted criticism for stifling free speech and weakening the system of checks and balances that underpins a well-functioning democracy. Moreover, the government's pursuit of a more conservative and religious agenda deviates from the secular foundations of the Turkish Republic as established by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, which is an interesting thing to maybe remember, a little historical materialism, okay? This and its attempts to augment presidential power through constitutional amendments lost the new government the trust of a large portion of Turkish society. Secularists apprehended a reversal of Ataturk's reforms. Liberals express anxieties about curtailed freedoms, and many nationalists harbor reservations concerning the foreign policy ramifications of Neo-Ottomanism. Neo-Ottomanism is a challenge to NATO's cohesion. This is what I'm saying, right? So it's like only one of these babies can be fed, like you got to starve one to feed the other. So that's probably a terrible analogy, but you get what I'm saying. Turkey's growing emphasis on Neo-Ottomanism presents a potential challenge to its critical role within NATO. Established in the aftermath of World War II to deter Soviet aggression, NATO functions on the principle of collective defense by requiring member states to come to each other's aid in the event of an attack. Neo-Ottomanism's prioritization of regional issues works against the principle of collective defense, potentially weakening the alliance's ability to respond effectively to external threats. Thus, Turkey's involvement in the Syrian civil war and its support for the Libyan government has strained relations with allies like the US, whose interests in these conflicts diverge significantly from Turkey's. But do they? Do they really? Because I don't really see Turkey and the US having such a big bad falling out like Russia and Iran and China. It looks like, I don't know. We'll just have to put a pin on that. Come circle back, right? Let me just check in with you guys. Everyone doing good? Cool. All right. Furthermore, Neo-Ottomanism focuses on reviving Islamic influence and potentially Islamic state structures that could be fundamentally at odds with NATO's commitment to secular and democratic values. Everyone knows NATO doesn't have any commitments except to world domination and genocide. But let's not forget that. Ambitions associated with Neo-Ottomanism, such as aiming to reclaim former Ottoman lands, could lead to disputes and border conflicts with neighbors, some of whom are also NATO members or partners. This raises concerns about internal strains within the alliance and the erosion of a unified front. Military interoperability, the ability of allied forces to work together seamlessly, is essential for NATO's effectiveness. However, Turkey's acquisition of military equipment incompatible with NATO systems, such as the S-400 missile system from Russia, disrupts this seamlessness. The S-400 system's incompatibility with NATO air defense architecture could endanger the ability to distinguish between friendly and hostile aircraft, and it could also endanger those military contractors who want exclusive contracts and monopoly over the military procurement for NATO. So anyway, this incompatibility not only hinders joint military exercises and operations, but also casts doubt on Turkey's commitment to the alliance's collective defense strategy. The United States' suspension of Turkey from the F-35 fighter jet program to the S-400 deal further exemplifies this strain. But also the F-35 is a hilarious story about how nobody actually wants these piece of shit jets anyway, and maybe the U.S. had an opportunity to save face and money on a product that no one was going to fucking buy anyway. So Neo-Ottomanism appealed to Turkish nationalists across the political spectrum, could create divisions and factions within the Turkish military, potentially fracturing internal cohesion and undermining Turkey's readiness to cooperate effectively with NATO allies. Neo-Ottoman rhetoric, often critical of Western powers and their actions in the region, creates tension with some NATO members, particularly those with whom Turkey has historical or ongoing political disagreements. Tensions with Greece, a fellow NATO member, over control of the Eastern Mediterranean could escalate due to Neo-Ottoman pronouncements. These tensions hinder cooperation and trust within the alliance. Well, now with Israel occupying Cyprus, we'll see what happens. So it should be interesting, if not horrifying. Furthermore, the emphasis on anti-Western orientation and aspirations to free Turkey from dependence on the United States could create a perception of Turkey as a rival or competitor rather than a partner among some NATO members. This erosion of trust and the perception of divergent goals significantly complicate efforts to maintain regional stability. So that's where I was saying, what I'm thinking about this Ottomanism concept is, and multipolarity is, you'll kind of see it's maybe one of those barometers that we can use, right? If Turkey becomes more assertive, independent, and actually breaks away from NATO in the name of this Neo-Ottomanism, I would say we're kind of moved into the multipolar reality. And if not, we have, I think, with BRICS, we have more of a bipolarity than multipolarity. But that's something that we will have to debate amongst ourselves, because I don't think anyone else has been thinking that it might be turning out to be more of a bipolar situation. But if the multipolarity has to be concentrated in the force of BRICS versus G20, to me, that's like Cold War 2.0. That's bipolarity, not multipolarity. So yeah, let me see a couple paragraphs. You guys want to finish it off? It looks like 3 more large paragraphs, segments. But because I was wanting to move, we were only 55 in, so I wanted to share a video, a longer video, some of the commentary from Syriana Analysis. He's got a video called Azerbaijan, Turkey, and Armenia, a new coalition against Russia. And so I find him being someone from the region there with a lot of, background and understanding of, like, he's a better, I would say I'd send people to kind of check out those sources before listening to kind of my take on it. But for anyone who doesn't know about those channels, hopefully my channel can be a bridge to information you've never learned. So I'm just gonna read, I think this, well, let's just see, I'll just do the whole, like, I feel like we've gotten so far in, I might as well just go the marathon and finish it off, and then I'll rest my voice a bit and we can watch up the video, and we can pause and make some comments. It's like an hour long, so we're not going to be able to get to all of it, but we'll see what we get through, and then maybe call it a night. So back to the article. The current state of Turkey's EU membership is contingent upon fulfilling a set of core principles enshrined in the Copenhagen criteria. These include robust democratic institutions, an independent judiciary, and an unwavering respect for human rights. Furthermore, the EU emphasizes peaceful resolutions to international conflicts in close cooperation with member states, principles outlined in the Common Foreign and Security Policy. Herein lies the crux of the tension between Turkey's aspirations under Neo-Ottomanism and EU membership. Turkey's assertive actions in territorial disputes in the Western Mediterranean, particularly with Greece and Cyprus, raise concerns among EU members about its commitment to peaceful conflict resolution and regional cooperation. Additionally, Turkey's involvement in the Libyan civil war has further strained relations with EU countries. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I guess, because they maybe have divergent interest in Libya, but they also kind of helped each other carve it up. So not sure how strained those relations actually are. A lot of this stuff is for show, and this kind of taking these kinds of statements at face value can kind of cause you to miss the actual bigger picture at play. So these escalating tensions threaten the stability and security of the Eastern Mediterranean region. Internal developments within Turkey further complicate the picture. Growing concerns about weakening democratic institutions, notably the independence of the judiciary and freedom of the press, cast doubt on Turkey's adherence to the Copenhagen criteria. Criticism from the EU and international organizations regarding crackdowns on dissent, erosion of the rule of law, and human rights violations have intensified scrutiny. Indicators rank Turkey low in terms of judicial independence and press freedom. I just don't find that the EU deserves to be any kind of, arbitrator over who is or is not democratic, right? But we all know that in this chat here. So, furthermore, Turkey's economic and social policies increasingly diverge from EU norms. Protectionist trade policies clash with the EU's focus on free trade, while a perceived shift towards a more conservative social agenda creates friction with the EU's emphasis on social liberalism. Turkey's recent economic policies, characterized by increased state intervention, nationalist rhetoric, and rising public spending, further distance it from the EU's economic model. Accusations of a growing conservatism in Turkish society raise questions about Turkey's compatibility with the EU's social values. Environmental and social welfare concerns may also diverge from the EU's established approach, creating additional obstacles to full integration. The economic fallout of Neo-Ottomanism. The initial period of robust economic growth under the AKP party in Turkey, 2002 to 2011, witnessed a remarkable 5.6% annual average GDP growth. However, this progress has subsequently been overshadowed by a series of economic woes. The execution of Neo-Ottomanism has contributed to a period of economic downturn. A cornerstone of a healthy economy is trust in its central institutions. However, the politicization of key economic institutions under Neo-Ottomanism, such as the central bank, severely damaged domestic and international confidence. Investors and citizens alike questioned the independence and competence of these institutions in managing economic policy, particularly regarding interest rates and inflation control. Trust in the Turkish lira's stability has eroded, discouraging foreign investment and hindering long-term economic planning. For instance, the abrupt 2021 dismissal of Nasi Agbal, the central bank governor by Erdogan, who advocates for low interest rates despite high inflation, sparked a sharp currency decline and raised concerns about central bank autonomy. I'm not sure if they're going to mention it in this article, but I think they had, this might be correct to characterize it as hyperinflation, because they had like a 70% inflation rate. It was pretty crazy. We don't know anything like that in the West. And I would mention, if Turkey is trying to be serious about these kinds of neo-Ottomanist ambitions and the West doesn't like it, what do you think they're going to do? Probably target the Turkish lira. It's probably what happened. Now, Erdogan's probably, got his leash back attached to his collar. So, Neo-Ottomanism strained ties with the European Union, a major trading bloc, and the United States, a significant source of foreign direct investment. Decreased trade volumes ensued. Not to mention, if Neo-Ottomanism really gets picked up or whatever, then it kind of clashes with Israel's ambitions in the Middle East, wouldn't you say? Just a little bit? Additionally, tensions with regional neighbors like Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates have disrupted tourism revenue and potential regional economic cooperation. Turkey's involvement in the 2020 conflicts in Libya and Nagorno-Karabakh, alongside its exploration for natural gas in the Eastern Mediterranean, provoked diplomatic disputes with several European and Middle Eastern countries. These disputes negatively impacted Turkey's trade and tourism sectors, which contribute approximately 25% of its GDP. The Turkish economy has become heavily reliant on foreign capital to finance growth, exposing it to external shocks. The lira's value fluctuates significantly in global currency markets. Uh, the lira's value fluctuates significantly in global currency markets can lead to significant disrupting commerce. I feel like that sentence isn't really written all that well. But yeah, value fluctuation of your currency is really disruptive. That's right. Import costs have increased and inflation is a growing predicament. Additionally, a high dependence on energy imports makes Turkey susceptible to global energy price fluctuations. Furthermore, a lack of sufficient domestic savings and foreign exchange reserves weakens Turkey's ability to weather these external economic storms. 2018 diplomatic row with the U.S. over the detention of an American pastor serves as a case in point. It triggered a currency crisis that saw the lira lose 40% of its value against the US dollar. This crisis also exposed Turkey's large current account deficit, which reached 6.5% of GDP in 2017. Turkey's focus on foreign policy under Neo-Ottomanism has diverted attention away from crucial domestic economic reforms. A lack of investment in infrastructure, education, and technological innovation still hinders long-term economic growth and competitiveness. The economy remains reliant on low value-added sectors such as construction, agriculture, and tourism. This lack of diversification makes the Turkish economy less resilient and hinders its ability to compete in the global marketplace. In 2019, the Global Competitiveness Index ranked Turkey poorly on indicators such as innovation capability, quality of education, and macroeconomic stability, placing it 59th out of 141 countries. I thought that the article was done there, and I was like, oh, good. But no, it goes on just a little bit more. So, despite the economic downturn, Turkey achieved a notable recovery in 2021 with an 11% growth rate to become the fastest growing G20 economy. So that's kind of impressive, 11% growth rate, This was driven by the easing of COVID-19 restrictions and expansionary fiscal and monetary policies. However, Turkey's 2021 growth came with challenges like high inflation, reaching 21.3% in November 2021, and a widening current account deficit, reaching 7.1% of GDP in the third quarter of 2021. Moreover, devastating February 2023 earthquakes caused significant human and material losses, further pressuring the already fragile macro-financial situation. Turkey's current inflation stands at 67.7%. See, I was right, around 70%. So the government's new medium-term program for 2023-2025 aims to achieve an average GDP growth of 5.3%. However, the success of the program will depend on the implementation of structural reforms, the diversification of trading partners, and the restoration of credibility and stability in the economic environment. Originally, Neo-Ottomanism aimed to boost Turkey's global influence and transform it into a major regional, possibly even international player. However, Turkey has suffered in the economic, cultural, and political arenas under Neo-Ottomanism. So that's the end of that. Thank you guys for going the distance with me. Hope that was interesting. I found it informative. So as far as to try and kind of impression, what kind of comments do I have about that article? Just gotta have to kind of marshal my thoughts. So bear with me for a moment. So I'm thinking with Turkey maybe making these moves with Azerbaijan, it sort of demonstrates a desperation. If they don't do something big for their base, and actually get some progress on their plans there, it's going to end in disaster, right? It's probably going to end in disaster no matter what. But they feel like they have to make this play, or they're going to look like fools, which they already do, I would imagine. So, but with a 70% inflation rate, anybody got some kind of you think you got realistic dreams of imperialistic power, how are you gonna finance expansion of an empire with 70% inflation? Pretty sure that's like lost in the sauce, wishful thinking, pie in the sky. But I ain't no economist, I ain't no military expert. So, but they are quite aggressive and assertive. But I think based on analyzing their relationship with NATO, it really comes down to as long as they're with NATO, you can tell that their Neo-Ottomanism is bullshit, or the only greater Turkey that they're ever going to be allowed to have is one that serves American interests, which is not greater Turkey. That's just more greater Israel, greater, American hegemony. So, but I think I've maybe made my point there. Let's go to the video here. And hopefully some of the commentary the analysis that they bring in this video will complement or validate some of my own analysis. I do appreciate these people who have been at it a lot longer than me, who are much more properly trained in journalism. So I do take some of my, I take some of my cues from some of these journalists like Richard Medhurst and I actually forget what this guy's name, Syriana Analysis.
EU and Armenia.
Let's find out. Maybe he'll say it when he introduces himself, eh? So, Extra Bull saying, great show. Thanks. Glad you're enjoying it. Yeah. So, looks like you guys are having your own conversation, and that's all good, So, if there's no comments so much about the article and stuff, I'm gonna, without further ado, let's watch some of this video. This is Azerbaijan, Turkey, and Armenia, a new coalition against Russia by Syrian Analysis. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. So,
have never been as close as we are now. Earlier this year, EU and Armenia have never been as close as we EU accession process. Very much welcome your to deepen our partnership. I'm also very pleased today to announce a political agreement between negotiators of the new partnership agenda, which identifies priorities on economic development, security, and resilience. To back this up, the European Union is providing 270 million euro resilience and growth plan for Armenia for the period of 2024 to 2027. This provides support to businesses. It improves connectivity between Armenia and the European Union and contributes to reform efforts. But our relations go beyond economics. We also provide financial, housing, and psychosocial support for vulnerable people, including the displaced Karabakh Armenians. People-to-people contacts are central to our relationship. That is why we are advancing in the visa liberalization dialogue. I'm pleased to announce that the Commission has adopted its proposal for the visa liberalization action plan. Once all conditions are met and this process is completed, it will bring Armenia and the rest of Europe closer together. In the meantime, we are stepping up our cooperation to promote peace and stability in the region. The EU mission in Armenia is playing a major role in this effort. We also discussed the developments related to Russia's aggression against Ukraine, and specifically the Russian hybrid activities in all countries, all neighboring countries. Armenia's commitment to democracy and freedom is key. These values must be protected, especially in the face of hybrid threats, disinformation, and foreign interference. At this critical moment, I'm happy to announce that we will provide substantial core funding for independent media to sustain their reporting in Armenia, supporting democracy and resilience. The EU will stand with Armenia to contribute its increased resilience and defend these
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syria Analysis. I'm your host, Kirk. Thank you again to today's. You guys know I'm an ethnic Armenian. I was born and raised in Syria, and I've been following the developments in Armenia, trying to follow this case closely. However, our friend, journalist Alison Demisian Moise, she has been hyper-focused on the Armenian case, and she's an expert in the issue, and she's a journalist also covering the developments inside Armenia and Armenia's relationship with the surrounding countries and also with Russia. Alison, thank you so much for coming to the show. Today we're going to discuss everything that is trying to discuss everything that is happening there. It's an open conversation between two Armenians, and it blew my mind when I saw, of course, Kaja Kallas flew right away to Armenia, and Macron made statements, important statements about the situation in Armenia, especially with Pashinyan. And speaking of Pashinyan, I would like to start this conversation with probably you can give us some timeline about what Armenia has.
His satellites was to go after the Armenian Apostolic Church. In keeping with the revolutionary atmosphere, the campaign was called New Armenia, New Catholicos. This campaign failed, but it was a hint of what was to come. Since that time, of course, we've had the 2020 war, in which Pashinyan notably, and a lot of people don't realize this, did not mobilize the Armenian military to aid in that war. In fact, he told people to gather in volunteer groups and just go. Others were prevented from going, but it was not in any way a fully Armenian-backed war effort. So it was rather those troops that were already there, the Artsakh Defense Army going up against Azerbaijan, NATO member Turkey, the second largest army in NATO, and also Israeli drones and droners, because at that point, Azerbaijan had not yet graduated its first class of drone operators. So that's also an important point to make. So this latest campaign against the church, we can mark as an important date May 26th. This was when the Catholicos of all Armenians, Karagin II, traveled to Switzerland for an international conference convened in collaboration with I believe it is the Protestant Church of Switzerland. And so it was aimed at being an interfaith conference, but very much focused on the Armenian religious heritage of Artsakh and also the rights of the people of Artsakh to return. Yes. And with the Catholicos speaking out very forcefully and bluntly about the razing of Armenian churches and heritage, cemeteries, and everything that is being done there. So that was certainly an event that was followed closely in Baku. Just days before that scheduled appearance, the Azerbaijan's state-appointed religious authority, their Sheikh al-Islam Pashizadeh, announced an urgent need to appoint a religious authority in exile for Armenia. And your audience should be aware that Azerbaijan increasingly claims the Republic of Armenia as quote-unquote Western Azerbaijan, and this is not. These are not Telegram channels. This is at the state level.
Official. Yes.
Official level. Correct. And in fact, and just a side note to mention, Azerbaijan, while historically Shia majority, the current authorities have actually imprisoned thousands of devout Shia who they believe who they are concerned about their loyalties.
Yes.
That is because obviously most devout Shia will follow either Ayatollah Khamenei in Iran or Ayatollah Sistani. I have traveled. I've never been to the Republic of Azerbaijan. I have been to Azerbaijan, the actual historic region of Azerbaijan in Iran, and you will see people with, perhaps a Sistani picture, but never the Azerbaijan kind of state religious authority. So all of this is just to set the background that this is very much an Azeri state campaign to give additional reason for its claim to Armenia. So this Sheikh al-Islam Pashizadeh,
So I don't normally appreciate just letting a video play for super long because that's like stream sniping or whatever. I don't know the the correct term for it. So I apologize for just kind of letting the video sit and play and not really having much commentary. Yeah, Kevork Almasian. I remember his name now. I just forgot. So, but yeah, he's pretty based. But they just have such better important information that provides such accurate context that I just kind of need to let them speak. So without further ado, it's very important to understand, I think it's Pashinyan, the Armenian president. It's not just these political commentaries take that he is a bad president for Armenia. You know, it's like he is definitely an installed puppet president that is throwing the country away, like Syria is no longer a country anymore. If Pashinyan seems to me like if he's allowed to continue neglecting the country in a time of emergency like this, we might see Armenia disappear too, and that's by design. So that's why it's important to hear what these commentators have to say going forward, because there's a whole bunch of stuff that's about to happen. So we don't exactly know what, but we're about to find out. So here we go.
He said that Echmiadzin, which is where the mother see of the Armenian Apostolic Church is located, he said this in Azerbaijan, which is again, we're going to have a lot of diversions, I think, on this episode, but I think your audience should be Araks River. This is the historic, some would even say heartland. In fact, the of Iran is of very origin. What is today called the Republic of Azerbaijan was actually historically called Shirvan or Aran. So it was never called Azerbaijan until the name was suggested in, I believe it was 1918. They adopted it. It was actually so problematic in terms of potential for causing trouble with Iran that the League of Nations did not accept the country under this name because it could cause territorial claims against Iran. Anyway, for various reasons, they went forward with this name anyway. And today we indeed see this name, this toponym, being deployed as a weapon, not only against Armenia, but against Iran. So I'm giving you the layout so we can go into all these issues. I think that we do need to talk about recent events in Iran and the rising tensions between Azerbaijan and Iran. But to just kind of refocus back to the church and what's happening today, what your audience needs to know, this church, Armenia is the first country to convert at the national level to Christianity. Yes. That was 301 AD. The founder of the Armenian church, St. Gregory the Illuminator, he was actually, the Christianity was brought to Armenia by the apostles Thaddeus and Bartholomew, and St. Gregory is the founder of the Armenian Apostolic Church, and actually each member of the Armenian clergy until today, from that time, were ordained by a clergy member that was ordained going all the way back to St. Gregory the Illuminator. So for Pashinyan to suggest, as he has, that the Armenian state should appoint the Catholicos, the head of the Armenian church, this represents an effort to break the chain of apostolic succession that dates back to 301 AD. So this is...
Well, I forgot to unmute myself. That's a pretty significant detail to understand with what's going on with Armenia there. I can be a little bit insensitive to religious current events, or like to things that happen to in the religious world, right? Because it's not really what interests me. Not trying to make that a central part of my identity, right? So I don't really want to have anything to do with religion as much as possible. So that kind of can make me a bit callous to people's concerns about their religious freedoms. But I have to say, with everything that's been happening in the Middle East the past like several decades, really, but like recently, there's been so much destruction of like historical property, I guess, but like historical sites that are important for all of humanity to understand where we come from. And I don't appreciate this violent uprooting of like our history, you know. Whatever can be criticized about Christianity, Islam, Judaism fairly, all of that aside, all of the rich cultural history that is preserved within the region deserves to be treated with respect. Okay, so yeah, Sean's saying, I think around 90% has been destroyed. Yeah, that is not something you can put a price on. You know, capitalism can't evaluate its own, like how much damage it's done. It's impossible to use capitalist logic to understand how much of a loss we've experienced by what they've done over these past few years. So, fuck ISIS. Back to the video.
Is a huge threat not only to the church structure, as it would of course cause schism if Pashinyan were to reconfigure the church according to his whims, but also this.
Are those really his whims, or he's receiving instructions from outside?
I think, you know, that is another topic. I mean, I think I certainly, you know, take note of the fact that there's a two-pronged attack on the Armenian Apostolic Church right now from Azerbaijan with this claim to Echmiadzin and the attempt to appoint a religious authority in Armenia, which not only traditionally, but according to the Armenian constitution, regards the Armenian Apostolic Church. Although there's separation of church and state, the Armenian Apostolic Church has a special status in Armenia. Over 90% of the population is a member of the Armenian Apostolic Church, and the title of the head of the Armenian Apostolic Church is the Catholicos of all Armenians. And that is why, even though, for example, we have Armenian Catholics, for example, the Mechitarian order in Italy, they even issued a statement pushing back against Pashinyan's attempts to meddle in the church. So that shows that he's not only the Catholicos of Armenians in Armenia or Armenian Apostolic, he's considered the leader of Armenian Christians all over the world. So this is a huge and unprecedented attack from within Armenia. It was on June 8th, actually, 1 week after this conference in Switzerland, that Pashinyan called on the Catholicos to step down. And via his Facebook page, he proposed not to have any structure to do with the Apostolic Church, choose a new Catholicos, but rather a plan very similar to his war mobilization efforts, where he would select.
What would you say to somebody that hasn't tried therapy before?
Just ask yourself.
I think 12 people to be part of a coordination committee, say that you have fasted for Lent once, you've read the Bible once, and you will join this new little Pashinyan selected posse, and that is how he proposes to reformat the Armenian Apostolic Church. Which, again, to make clear, this would break the church. That's the implication. This is not about whether the Catholicos is perfect or not. This is not about any clergy member. This is about breaking apostolic succession that dates back until the apostles and Jesus Christ. So this is a major thing. This is a major story that affects Armenians everywhere, because, for example, Armenians, how could they perhaps receive citizenship of their homeland in this new real Armenia that Pashinyan wants to make? Most Armenians will apply for citizenship using their baptism record. So if the church authority means nothing, then basically the power vested in the Catholicos is the power goes down to each member of the clergy. So if all of that is worth nothing, then essentially Pashinyan is trying to reformat Armenia into a state with no national basis, national foundation. That is what's happening. So, and there's been a few, I think, key events after that, namely the breach of the gates of the Mother See of Holy Echmiadzin, which is the throne of the Catholicos, that occurred just 5 days ago. People rushed actually to.
I think I'm just gonna skip ahead a little bit. Apologies to skipping some important information maybe, but if anyone wants to go back and rewatch the whole thing, feel free. I encourage you to do so. Just for the sake of time, let me try and skip ahead to hopefully catch a little bit of other just as relevant information that you might miss if we don't take the time to do that. So
what we are really witnessing is the deliberate dismantling of Armenian statehood from within, masked as a progressive transformation. Globalist institutions, which have aggressively undermined Christianity.
He's started playing a video of himself now, so I'm just going to rewind it, hopefully to the point where he introduces it. Okay, there we go.
Event which people cannot really turn their eyes and ears away from this. So I will just screen this video, which I tried to my nose to a leader and more like a local manager for foreign interests. One by one, he has gone after the pillars of Armenian nationhood, the national identity, the sovereignty of Artsakh, and now the Armenian Apostolic Church. Let's be clear, you don't have to be a supporter of the church or even religious to see what this is. The church in Armenia is not just a spiritual institution, it is the spine of our cultural and historical memory. We were the first nation to adopt Christianity as a state religion in 301 AD. For most Armenians, their identity and history are inseparable from that fact. That's targeted, which have aggressively undermined Christianity in Israel. The batteries fly in to prop him up. Q. States and media funding keep flowing. Meanwhile, critics are silenced, denied entry to their own homeland, including Armenian journalists and activists in the diaspora. I know this firsthand. Is this a democracy or authoritarianism dressed in EU blue and wrapped in hollow slogans? Pashinyan's war against the Armenian church is only the final act in a much larger play. He had already handed over Artsakh to Azerbaijan. Now, under foreign pressure, particularly from Baku and Ankara, he is going after the church because both Turkey and Azerbaijan view the Armenian church as a threat to their aspirations in Armenia, a source of potential resistance and a voice that can reignite national self-determination. In other words, a problem for anyone hoping to dismantle Armenia permanently. But there is another layer here. Undermining the church doesn't just weaken the nation, it alienates Russia. Pashinyan's entire pivot to the West is designed to push Armenia into NATO's sphere. That means cutting off strategic ties with both Russia and Iran, paving the way for corridors that bypass both, and opening the gates to Euro-Atlantic control of the region's trade, gas, and politics. Russia continues its passive stance under the guise of non-intervention, risking the balance of power in the South Caucasus. But the intervention has already happened. It is just flying EU flags. The Armenian people are waking up. Pashinyan has lost the trust of the public, and he knows it. That's why his government relies on suppression and Western backing to maintain control. The Armenian people should not be turned into Ukraine 2.0 and pawns for Brussels or Washington. Nor should they allow their church, the last standing institution of independent Armenian identity, to be destroyed without strong pushback. What we are seeing now is not just a political dispute, it is a war for Armenia's soul. And every Armenian, whether in Armenia or the diaspora, must understand exactly what is what is at stake? This is what I wanted to say at the end of this video. Am I being too paranoid that the legs that Armenia stands on are being targeted one after another, and Armenia could be swallowed by the neighboring country, especially Azerbaijan? And I mean, I was just checking the video of the Azeri. This
Monday CRM has the
No, you're not overstating it. Pashinyan has steadily consolidated and purged essentially the state since he came to power, starting with the courts, proceeding on to the police, the military. Again, many people don't realize that during the war in 2020, Armenia's most competent generals were actually not allowed to be involved in the war effort. Or you had instances where, for example, the former defense minister was demoted, where he was essentially put on the front lines.
So this is another important piece of information. This is why I wanted to share this video with you guys. So sorry, what's up, Cowboy Kitty? Good to see you. Abby's not going to be here tonight. It's just me. Just got a headache, massive migraine today. So hopefully she'll be right as rain by next week. So, but this is really important to recognize how the Nagorno-Karabakh situation went the way that it did, and how the consequences of that are playing out today. Just listen to what happened with their generals, right? That's not how you defend a nation. So
Defense minister was demoted, where he was essentially put on the front lines. So being the most patriotic people. And I think that that's not just a long pause between the war and the 2020 of the times. Wait, it came back in the 90s. Everybody was with sick, and Armenians just win by their heart, and now we're in
yeah, sorry, I got a message from my computer. I need to check my sound. It'll do a check 1 2. Can you guys hear me? Because whatever happened last week, I was just trying to mute and stop my cam so that any internet problems that we were having may be minimized. I'm hoping that not sharing your cam will reduce some of the problems. So can you guys hear me? You can hear me, but not the video. Okay. Maybe I just have to refresh the video or something. Can you hear? I can't hear the ad there. So that was a weird glitch. Let me know if you can hear it now. Good? Are you guys able to hear? No sound on the video again? Uh-oh, okay. I'm not sure. Maybe if I have to reshare my screen, maybe that's what happened. Technical difficulties. My apologies, everyone. The video's still muted. Okay. I think we get hit. We're so, Jacqueline's saying, the left-wing channels get hit with more annoying ads than the right-wing ones. I think that we are very specifically targeted with ads personally designed to antagonize us very, very specifically. So I would imagine they probably, I agree, no proof, whatever, whatsoever, but I bet you they do target left-wing people with more psychologically damaging ads. So let's try this again here. Let me know if you can hear it.
All have pieces against them if they're not in jail or in jail in Baku. So this is our situation. So those who are following all of these details do not see this as, boo-hoo for us. We see it as a very much methodically executed, essentially reconfiguration of Armenia from a country that is able to stand on its own to one which is going to be put under the Turkish Azeri NATO umbrella.
Yes.
So, and critics will say, oh well, before Armenia was under Russia, they didn't help, blah blah. I mean, there were no Russian troops.
So it sounds like Sula can hear it now. Anyone else want to let me know if everyone can hear it? Cash me outside. I'm guessing that's our friend Kitty. Sorry, with her cosplaying. You're never getting these files, Abby Doo and gang. Oh yeah, you doing the Scooby Doo bit. Sorry, I don't have the best banter for you today. Whatever, caught me off guard, but here we go. Let me know if you can't hear the video, please.
Since the USSR times, it was only under Pashinyan that Russian troops were brought in to keep the peace. And then when Artsakh was under siege, Pashinyan recognized it as Azerbaijan, and essentially sabotaged any what questionable mandate they even had. So that's I don't even remember how we got there, but that's a little backdrop for you.
I'm particularly interested.
So I'm going to skip ahead again just for one more segment, and then because they play a bit of a video, yeah, they mention that it's the state media of Azerbaijan that that was making claims that are like Armenia doesn't deserve to be a country, right? And it's not just a Telegram or TikTok commentary or whatever. So let's finish off the stream with
Steel from Turkey.
With the later part of the video. Sorry.
All of this is, this is not to be, this is just the facts. This is just the reality. And so back to my point, Armenia, this idea that Armenia should come to should build relations with Turkey rather than Iran and Russia because Turkey, and I'm sorry, but the EU, that means Turkey.
Yeah.
That means NATO, that means Turkey. There's no question about this. So to go to Turkey means you will not be a sovereign country, because Turkey, it doesn't matter if it's an Islamist government or a Kemalist government, Turkey has a program, this Zengezur corridor idea, this is old. This goes back to Ataturk. This is not a new thing because Erdogan is an Islamist. No, this is a long-standing program because they want to unite with the fellow Turkic Council member countries to go to Central Asia. And so this is what puts them at odds with Iran, with Russia, even China. And I think with Russia and Iran, look at the recent events that have been going on. I think they are also having an awakening, because Russia, for example, one of their I don't know if he's actually state supported, but he was certainly in the press, Dugin. He was always touting Eurasianism. He was, he was saying from before the 2020 war, Armenia should give back territory to Azerbaijan. He was praising Azerbaijan. He saw that, Azerbaijan and Russia relations were going to blossom after Artsakh was resolved. And look at what's happening today. The warnings that now actually you're going to have a problem in your backyard, in the Caucasus, Azerbaijan is not going to join your Eurasian bloc. They're with NATO. And now we see this. I mean, now things are coming to a head very much between Russia and Azerbaijan. I don't know if it will continue. Obviously, I think Putin he's very conservative. They've had the Russian ambassador was assassinated famously in Ankara. Russia's deputy head of the peacekeeping mission was murdered along with his whole contingent by Azeri forces in 2023. And that was kind of brushed under the rug. So
that's reminds me, it's like one of those moments where I need to try it's like a JB font style, look at the camera. What did she just say? You remember he does that funny thing, whatever. That was definitely what'd you say? Because I don't hear about half of this stuff. And it provides some pretty useful context, I'd say. She's saying that the Russian ambassador is being assassinated by Turkish people. Let's hear that again, eh?
Oh, we see this. I mean, now things are coming to a head very much between Russia and Azerbaijan. I don't know if it will continue. Obviously, I think Putin he's very conservative. They've had the Russian ambassador was assassinated famously in Ankara. Russia's deputy head of the peacekeeping mission was murdered along with his whole contingent by Azeri forces in 2023. And that was kind of brushed under the rug. So, Russia has also, taken some hits, but I think now it looks like Azerbaijan, the way in which, for those who weren't aware, they just actually, in response to a Russian crackdown on the ethnic Azeri kind of organized crime mob in Russia, in which at least two men were killed. Azerbaijan kind of hit back immediately by rounding up a bunch of relocants who had come after the Ukraine invasion. So, and broadcasting videos of them bloodied in cages, making a spectacle of it. So I think it's clear that Azerbaijan, they don't feel they need Russia at the very least, and they're not interested in de-escalation. And also, we can mention Iran. There seems to be a growing tension because the Iranian president, Pezeshkian, had actually had a phone call with the Azerbaijani president, Ilham Aliyev, last week, in which he basically raised that Iran had intelligence that Israeli drones had entered and attacked Iran via Azerbaijan. And he, according to the readout, he requested that Azerbaijan investigate these reports. And then shortly after that, the Iranian ambassador in Armenia had a press conference to discuss regional events, and he was asked about this report, about this phone call, and he followed up and he said, depending on the results of Azerbaijan's investigation, we will proceed accordingly. And actually, what has happened with the government has been on a kind of a campaign against the supreme leader himself.
Yes.
So all of this is to say that I think that there are going to be some consequences.
You guys are making a joke about a legal mindset, by the way. That legal mindset's a channel on YouTube. If you haven't heard, go ahead and check him out. I'm curious what his take would be on the legal fallout to this Russian-Armenian situation, because Azerbaijan is opening up like torture, murder case against the Russian police or something like that. You know, it's like lawfare going on. So I'm curious to hear. I'm sure he probably won't talk about it, won't ever hear this. But if you want to share it with him or something, if you happen to know him or something, I would. As much as I appreciate hearing about Vitaly, the legal situation, like that's like a little bit. I don't know what you call it. That's like small potatoes compared to these big legal things going on. So, but you know, the lawyers always just say, that's not my area of expertise. It's like, I thought you were an expert on the law. Oh yeah, but not that kind of law. Oh, thanks. Right? Maybe you should be less of a specialist, eh? I think there's actually a case to be made for being a very strong generalist. Okay. Anyway.
The changes in alignment and territorial control in the West Asian region. So I don't think it's so simple as, you know, Russia bad, EU good. I mean, people need to really get realistic, because Azerbaijan is very realistic. Iran is very realistic. Armenia, the head of state of Armenia, unfortunately, is not preparing for anything other than keeping power.
Yeah, I also believe that. And I just want to respond to one of our commentators via video. He says, what evidence do they have that Turkey doesn't want Armenia to exist? This is an emotional or historical grievance by Armenians. It's not fact-based. And I want to show first the statement of Aliyev, just for context.
İndiki Ermənistan bizim torpağımızdır. Və mən bunu dəfələrlə deyəndə sonra mənə irad tuturlar, çalışırlar irad tutmağa ki, mənim ərazi iddiam var. Mən bunu tarixi...
Actually, gotta do a little bit of... I gotta read these subtitles in case and someone's just listening and not watching, not actually catching what the Azerbaijani president Aliyev is saying. So give me a moment. Okay.
It's by Armenian. It's not fact-based. And I want to show first the statement of Aliyev, just for context.
İndiki Ermənistan.
So Aliyev says, present-day Armenia is our land.
Bizim torpağımızdır. Və mən bunu dəfələrlə...
When I repeatedly said this before, they tried to object and allege that I have territorial claims.
Deyəndə sonra mənə irad tuturlar, çalışırlar irad tutmağa ki, mənim ərazi iddiam var. Mən bunu...
I am saying this as a historical fact.
Tarixi həqiqət kimi deyirəm. Və bununla paralel...
In parallel with this, we need to jointly develop the concept of returning to Western Azerbaijan. What he means is Armenia.
Olaraq, mən hesab edirəm ki, birgə səylərlə biz Qərbi Azərbaycana qayıdış konsepsiyasında işləməliyik. İndi Qarabağ münaqişəsi həll olunandan sonra...
Now that the Karabakh conflict has been resolved, if you want to call it that, I don't feel like it has been. This is the issue on our agenda.
Bizim gündəliyimizdə duran məsələ budur.
Boy, ads. Nobody likes you.
So after resolving the Karabakh issue...
So hopefully the ad was well placed there to distract you from the statement that I was reading. Maybe I'll rewind it briefly. And so now that the Karabakh conflict has been resolved, this is the issue on our agenda. Okay, so the onward progression of the next genocide.
Elimizdə duran məsələ budur.
So after resolving the Karabakh issue, this is a Western Azerbaijan issue is now on the table, and Western Azerbaijan, according to Aliyev, is Armenia, the current Armenian sovereign nation. And Azerbaijan receives its weapons from two major sources. One is Israel, the second is Turkey. Turkey also gives a lot of intelligence assistance, data, satellite, drone operational facilities for the drones which were used against the Armenians in Karabakh. So Turkey and Azerbaijan, they're partners in this when it comes to Karabakh and in Armenia.
I mean, they refer to themselves now as one.
Okay, I think I'm gonna leave it there. Appreciate everyone joining us today. So sorry if that was a bit of a jarring, abrupt cutting off. If you're enjoying that video, go check out the whole thing, because showing you some clips is nice, but I don't like necessarily clips all that much, because I like watching the whole video, right? When I listen to music, I like listening to the whole album, because I don't like missing stuff. I want the entire context, but that's just me. So Sean is saying, is this a greater Israel thing? It's like, yeah, it's a greater some kind of, it's either a greater Turkey or a greater Israel or whatever. We're going to see which one of these narcissistic or whatever psychopathic nations plays the other one better, I guess. What the fucking hell of a world we live in, eh? So you're saying, I just realized that I know absolutely nothing about that end of the world. Yeah, me too. So I'm trying to learn a lot more about other places like that. It's pretty interesting, and it's kind of sad how you can really see the problem of imperialism very clearly when you start to see the recurring themes and narratives and events occurring all over the world. So, but one problem with having such a global outlook is when you're looking so much at the big picture, you're losing, you can't pay attention enough to the small picture of your own life and what's happening all over the world at the same time. You're going to have to kind of split your attention. So let's all learn how to navigate that effectively. What we have is each other that can help us learn things, so that hopefully we don't have to do all the work ourselves. And on that note, appreciate you all. Let me just see what else you guys. 2033, whatever, meteor on the White House. You can only hope. Okay, I didn't really have a outro video for you tonight, but that's okay. So I'm just gonna close with some music, and I'll see you guys all next week. Hopefully Abby will be joining us, and stay calm, carry on, be revolutionary, whatever that is, let's try and figure that out. So without further ado, thank you very much. Have a good night. Peace.